The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of Denver International Airport as 17-year-old Alexis Taylor checked her watch for the third time. This was her first solo flight, and she wasn't taking any chances on being late. Her mom had moved to Texas after the divorce 3 years ago, and though they video called almost every day, nothing compared to actually being together in person. Alexis adjusted her backpack and smiled at the thought of surprising her mom with the hand-knitted scarf she'd made, golden yellow, her mom's favorite color. She'd learned to knit from her grandfather, who had raised her since she was little. Most people knew him as Chuck Norris, action movie star and martial arts legend. But to Alexis, he was just Grandpa, the man who made pancakes shaped like animals on Sunday mornings and taught her how to change a tire. Remember, he had told her that morning as he dropped her off at the airport, his eyes crinkling at the corners. Stay calm in any situation. The strongest person in the room isn't the loudest. It's the one who keeps their head when everyone else is losing theirs. Alexis nodded, taking in his words like she always did. Her grandfather had adopted her mother as a baby, and though they didn't share blood, they shared something deeper, a code of honor, respect, and standing up for what's right. The flight status board flashed an update. Flight 236 to Dallas. Boarding. Alexis joined the line, double-checking her ticket and passport one last time. The excitement bubbled inside her like a shaken soda. She'd planned this trip for months, saving up from her weekend job at the local bookstore. As the line moved forward, Alexis noticed the gate agent, a thin man with dark circles under his eyes and a name tag that read, Thomas. He wasn't smiling, like the other staff. Instead, his movements were sharp and impatient as he processed each passenger. When it was finally her turn, Alexis handed over her ticket with a polite, "Good morning." Thomas barely looked at her, scanning the ticket with quick, jerky movements. His face suddenly hardened as he looked from the ticket to his computer screen and back to her. "This ticket isn't valid," he said flatly. Alexis blinked in surprise. "There must be some mistake. I checked in online this morning." She pulled out her phone to show him the confirmation email, but Thomas waved it away. "The system shows this seat was double booked. You'll have to go to customer service." The woman behind Alexis sighed loudly. A businessman checking his watch muttered something under his breath. "But I have my boarding pass right here," Alexis said, still keeping her voice steady. "And I received no notification about any booking issues." Thomas's face flushed. The line behind Alexis was growing, and a supervisor had glanced their way twice now. "Look," he snapped, louder than necessary. "This ticket isn't valid for today's flight." Alexis took a deep breath, remembering her grandfather's words. "Could you please check again? My confirmation number is—" "I've checked." Thomas cut her off. Several passengers were watching now. Someone had taken out their phone and was recording. This happens when people try to use discounted tickets they're not eligible for. The unfair accusation stung, but Alexis kept her composure. "Sir, I purchased this ticket legally through your website. I have the receipt and confirmation. Could I speak with your supervisor?" Thomas's nostrils flared. Without warning, he grabbed the printed ticket from her hand and tore it in half. "Now there's definitely no valid ticket," he said coldly. "Next passenger." The airport seemed to freeze. Alexis stared at the torn pieces of her ticket, shock washing over her. A few passengers gasped. The recording phones multiplied. "You can't do that," said an elderly woman from the line. "That was completely unnecessary." Thomas pointed to the customer service desk across the terminal. "Take it up with them. I have a flight to board." Alexis's hands trembled slightly as she collected the torn pieces of her ticket. The unfairness of it all made her want to cry, but instead she straightened her shoulders, just like her grandfather had taught her. "I'll need your full name and employee ID number," she said calmly, pulling out her own phone to record. "And I'd like to speak with the supervisor on duty." "Immediately," Thomas laughed dismissively. "Good luck with that. Next." As Alexis stepped aside, she noticed more passengers recording the interaction. A kind-looking woman approached her and said, "I got the whole thing on video, honey. That wasn't right." "Thank you," Alexis replied, fighting back tears. She walked a few steps away and called her grandfather. As the phone rang, she watched Thomas continuing to process passengers, acting as if nothing had happened. "Hey kiddo, are you on the plane?" Her grandfather's warm voice came through. "Grandpa," Alexis said, her voice finally cracking a little. Something happened at the gate. She explained the situation as clearly as she could. As she spoke, she noticed a flight attendant watching her from nearby, concern evident on her face. "Stay right where you are," her grandfather said, his voice calm but with that steel edge she recognized, the same tone he used in his movies right before he took down the bad guys. "I'm making some calls. Remember what I taught you. Document everything, stay professional, and don't let anyone make you feel small." What Thomas didn't know as he continued processing passengers was that the grandfather of the young black girl whose ticket he had just ripped up wasn't just any grandfather. Chuck Norris had faced down countless adversaries on screen, but in real life his most important fights were for his family and for what was right. And as Alexis ended the call with her grandfather, she knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The torn ticket in her hand wasn't just paper, it was evidence. And her grandfather had taught her that standing up against unfairness wasn't just about throwing punches. Sometimes it was about staying calm, gathering facts, and making sure accountability happened the right way. Little did Thomas know that his impulsive action was about to trigger a chain of events that would change not just his day, but the policies of an entire airline. The torn ticket still clutched in her hand, Alexis walked away from the gate, her heart pounding. Despite the unfairness of what had just happened, she remembered her grandfather's teachings. Never let them see you sweat. She found a quiet corner near a coffee shop and took several deep breaths. "Are you all right, honey?" A middle-aged woman with kind eyes approached her. "I saw what happened back there. That was completely uncalled for." "I'm okay," Alexis replied, managing a small smile. "Thank you for checking." The woman introduced herself as Patty, a kindergarten teacher from Colorado. "I got the whole thing on video," she said, showing Alexis her phone. "That man had no right to treat you that way. Would you like me to email this to you?" Alexis nodded, gratefully. More passengers from the line stopped by, offering words of support and their contact information as witnesses. One businessman in a navy suit handed her his card. He was an attorney. "If you need someone to verify what happened, call me," he said. That was textbook discrimination. Meanwhile, Chuck Norris was already in action mode. After hanging up with Alexis, he immediately called his longtime friend Robert, who happened to sit on the board of directors for the airline. "Robert, it's Chuck. I need your help with something urgent," he said, his voice calm but determined, as he explained the situation. "I'll handle this personally," Robert assured him. "This is completely unacceptable. Stay on the line while I contact the regional manager." As Chuck waited, he sent a text to Alexis. "Help is coming. Stay strong. I'm proud of how you're handling this." Within minutes, a frantic airport manager named Lisa was rushing toward Alexis. Someone had recognized Chuck Norris's granddaughter from a recent charity event they'd attended together, and word had spread quickly through airport staff. "Ms. Taylor?" Lisa asked, slightly out of breath. "I'm the terminal operations manager. I just heard about what happened and I want to personally apologize. We're going to make this right." Alexis showed her the torn ticket and the confirmation on her phone. Lisa's face paled when she saw the evidence. "This is completely unacceptable," she said. "Let me get you on the next flight to Dallas, which leaves in an hour. First class, of course." "Thank you," Alexis said quietly. "But what about Thomas? This isn't about getting a free upgrade. It's about making sure this doesn't happen to someone else who might not have people supporting them like I do." Lisa nodded. "Seriously. I understand completely. I assure you this will be addressed at the highest level. Thomas has been removed from the gate pending an investigation." Meanwhile, the videos of the incident were spreading like wildfire. A passenger had posted it with the caption, "Flight attendant rips up black girl's ticket at Denver airport. Retweet. Until the airline responds." Another had added, "Does he know who her grandfather is?" Chuck Norris learned justice. By the time Alexis was settling into the first-class seat on her new flight, the airline's social media team was in crisis mode. The company's mentions were flooded with angry comments and demands for accountability. Chuck. Norris, however, wasn't interested in public shaming. After ensuring Alexis was taken care of, he called his pilot. "Frank, I need the jet ready in 30 minutes, he said, already packing a small overnight bag. This wasn't about swooping in as a celebrity. This was about being there for his granddaughter. Throughout his career, Chuck had faced countless opponents on screen, but nothing stirred his protective instincts like family. As Alexis's plane took off, she received another text from her grandfather. "On my way to Texas. We'll meet you at your mom's. Love you, kiddo." She smiled, feeling a wave of gratitude. Her grandfather had always taught her that true strength wasn't about fighting. It was about standing up for what's right and knowing when to accept help. Back in Denver, the airline executives were gathered in an emergency meeting. The company's social media engagement had skyrocketed, but not in a good way. The hashtag #RespectAllPassengers was trending, with Alexis's story as the catalyst. "Do we know who the girl is?" asked the head of public relations, scrolling through the growing number of comments. The CEO looked grim. "Her name is Alexis Taylor, and her grandfather is Chuck Norris." A heavy silence fell over the room. "Chuck Norris as in the Chuck Norris?" someone finally asked. "The very same," the CEO confirmed. "And he's already reached out through a board member. He's not threatening legal action or making demands. He simply wants to discuss how we can do better." That was Chuck's way. Despite his tough guy image, he had always believed in dialogue over confrontation when possible. Violence was for the movies. In real life, meaningful change came through communication and accountability. The airline's executive team quickly drafted a formal apology and announced a comprehensive review of their customer service protocols. They arranged for Alexis to receive a full refund, but more importantly, they requested a meeting with both her and her grandfather to discuss long-term solutions. As evening fell, Alexis finally arrived at her mother's house in the suburbs of Dallas. Her mom wrapped her in a tight hug, having already heard the whole story. "You handled it just like Grandpa taught you," she said proudly. "Stand your ground, stay dignified, and document everything." Alexis nodded, suddenly feeling the emotional weight of the day. "I just kept thinking about what Grandpa always says, that respect isn't something you demand, it's something you earn by how you treat others." 3 hours later, Chuck Norris's private jet touched down in Dallas. He wasn't coming as a celebrity, seeking special treatment. He wasn't coming to throw his weight around or demand heads on platters. He was coming as a grandfather who had taught his family to stand up against injustice, and as a man who believed in using whatever influence he had to create positive change. What had started as one torn ticket was about to become a lesson in accountability, respect, and the power of standing up for what's right, not with fists, but with dignity and determination. The morning sun painted golden streaks across the conference room of the Grand Hyatt Dallas. The airline had suggested meeting at their corporate headquarters, but Chuck had politely requested a neutral location. "This isn't about intimidation," he had told Alexis. "It's about finding common ground." Alexis smoothed down her simple blue dress, feeling a flutter of nervousness. Her mother sat beside her, offering a reassuring smile. Across from them, 3 empty chairs waited for the airline representatives. Chuck, dressed in a casual button-up shirt rather than his signature action hero attire, leaned over to Alexis. "Remember, kiddo, the goal here isn't punishment, it's progress." At precisely 10 a.m., 3 people entered the room. The airline's regional director, a tall man named Bill with salt and pepper hair, the head of customer experience, a woman with a crisp pantsuit and an iPad clutched to her chest, and to Alexis's surprise, Thomas himself, the gate agent who had torn up her ticket. Thomas looked different now. Shoulders hunched, eyes downcast. His earlier arrogance replaced by visible discomfort. When he glanced up and realized Chuck Norris was sitting across from him, his face went pale. Bill stepped forward, hand extended. "Mr. Norris, thank you for agreeing to this meeting. We want to start by offering our deepest apologies to Ms. Taylor for her experience." Chuck shook his hand firmly but didn't smile. "I appreciate that. But I think those words should come directly from the person responsible. All eyes turned to Thomas, who swallowed hard. The silence stretched, uncomfortable and heavy. "I'm sorry," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "What I did was wrong. There's no excuse for it." Alexis studied him. The anger she'd felt at the airport had softened, replaced by curiosity. "Can I ask why? Was it just a bad day, or was there something about me specifically?" Thomas flinched at the direct question. He glanced at his superiors, who nodded encouragingly. It was... He took a deep breath. It was both. We were short-staffed, the system was glitching, and I was at the end of my rope. But that's no excuse. The truth is, when I saw you, something in me just reacted. I grew up in a small town where there weren't many people who looked different from me. My family had certain views. I've been trying to unlearn those views, but clearly I still have work to do. The room fell silent again. Thomas's honesty was unexpected. Chuck leaned forward. "That couldn't have been easy to admit." "Easier than continuing to lie to myself?" Thomas replied, finally meeting Chuck's eyes. "When I saw the videos later, I didn't recognize the person I was being. That's not who I want to be." The airline director cleared his throat. "We've prepared a formal apology statement and compensation package," he said, sliding a folder across the table. "And Thomas has been placed on administrative leave pending completion of our diversity training program." Chuck raised his hand. "If I may make a suggestion, firing Thomas might feel like justice, but it won't solve the larger problem. What if instead he became part of the solution?" All eyes turned to Chuck, questioning. "I run a foundation that works with at-risk youth," he explained. "Many of these kids face discrimination every day. They could benefit from hearing Thomas's story, how he recognized his bias and is working to change it." Alexis's mother spoke. "Farsa, that's assuming Thomas is genuinely interested in that change." Thomas nodded slowly. "I am. This incident has been a wake-up call. I have a daughter at home. I don't want her growing up thinking it's okay to treat people the way I treated Alexis." The customer experience manager, who had been quiet until now, set down her iPad. "Actually, we've been considering a complete overhaul of our training protocols. What if we created something more comprehensive, not just for new hires but ongoing education for all staff?" She looked at Alexis. "And what if we asked people with first-hand experience to help us design it?" Alexis straightened in her chair. She hadn't expected to be invited into the solution. "You mean like sharing my experience?" "More than that," the woman replied. "You're a young person with a fresh perspective. We could use your input on what meaningful change actually looks like." Chuck watched his granddaughter's face light up with interest. This was what he had hoped for. Not just an apology, but a path forward. "I'd be interested," Alexis said thoughtfully. "But only if it's genuine. No PR stunts." Bill nodded firmly. "We're beyond PR at this point. This incident has made us realize we have real work to do." The conversation shifted, becoming more collaborative. Thomas, gradually finding his voice, shared insights from his time on the front lines, the pressure, the lack of support, the inadequate training. Alexis described how it felt to be singled out, to have her documentation dismissed without consideration. What had begun as a confrontation was transforming into something unexpected, a chance for real understanding. During a brief break, Chuck pulled Alexis aside. "You're doing great, kiddo. How are you feeling about all this?" Alexis considered the question. "Honestly, I came in angry. I wanted Thomas to lose his job. But now..." She glanced across the room where Thomas was showing her mom pictures of his daughter. "Now I'm thinking maybe there's a better way." Chuck squeezed her shoulder, pride evident in his eyes. "That's my girl. Anyone can tear something down. It takes real strength to build something better." When they reconvened, Bill presented a surprising proposal. "We'd like to establish a passenger advocate program. Trained staff whose sole job is to step in when conflicts arise at gates or on planes. and we'd like Alexis to consult on the development. For the first time that day, Chuck Norris smiled. Throughout his career, he'd played heroes who solved problems with roundhouse kicks and tough talk. But here was his granddaughter, barely 18, creating change through conversation and collaboration. As the meeting concluded with handshakes and exchanged contact information, Thomas approached Alexis directly. "I know a simple apology doesn't fix things," he said quietly, "but I want you to know that meeting you, really meeting you, not just seeing you as another passenger, has changed something in me. Thank you for being willing to sit at the same table." Alexis offered a small smile. "We all have work to do. The important thing is being willing to do it." Outside the hotel, as they walked to the car, Alexis's mom wrapped an arm around her daughter's shoulders. "You know what your grandfather told me when I was about your age? That forgiveness isn't about letting someone off the hook. It's about not letting their actions determine who you become." Alexis looked back at the hotel, thinking about the unexpected turns the day had taken. What had begun with a torn ticket was transforming into something none of them could have predicted, a chance to mend something much deeper than a travel document. 3 weeks after the meeting in Dallas, Alexis stood in front of her laptop, putting the finishing touches on her presentation. Her bedroom walls, covered with photos of friends and family, watched over her as she practiced explaining her ideas about how the airline could improve its customer service training. "Remember to speak slowly," her mom advised, leaning against the doorframe with a mug of tea in her hands. "You tend to speed up when you're excited about something." Alexis nodded, taking a deep breath. Today was the first virtual workshop with the airline's training development team, and her stomach was doing flips. When she'd agreed to help, she hadn't realized how big this project would become. Her phone buzzed with a text from her grandfather. "You've got this, kiddo. Just be yourself." That morning, as Alexis logged into the video conference, she was surprised to see not just the customer experience team, but also the airline's CEO, several board members, and about 20 employees from different departments, including Thomas, the gate agent who had torn her ticket. "Thank you all for joining today," began the CEO, a woman with warm eyes and a no-nonsense haircut. "As you know, 3 weeks ago we had an incident that opened our eyes to some serious gaps in our training. Rather than sweep it under the rug, we've decided to use it as a catalyst for change." She nodded to Alexis. "And we're fortunate that Ms. Taylor has agreed to help us learn from what happened." Alexis swallowed hard and shared her screen. The title slide read, "Beyond Procedures, Seeing the Person Behind the Passenger." "I'm not an expert in airline operations," Alexis began, her voice steadier than she felt. "But I am an expert in how it feels to be on the receiving end of assumptions and bias. And that's the perspective I want to share today." Over the next hour, Alexis walked the group through her experience. Not just what happened at the gate, but how it made her feel, the assumptions she believed were made about her, and how simple changes in approach could have transformed the entire interaction. "The issue wasn't just that my ticket was torn up," she explained. "It was that I wasn't given the chance to be heard. My evidence was dismissed before it was even considered." Thomas, who had been quietly listening, raised his hand. "Can I add something here?" When Alexis nodded, he continued, "From my side of the counter, we're under so much pressure to keep things moving that we sometimes forget we're dealing with real people. We're trained to spot problems, but not necessarily trained how to handle them with humanity." The CEO leaned forward. "That's exactly why we're here. We need to redesign our training to balance efficiency with empathy." What Alexis had expected to be a one-time presentation evolved into a full-day workshop. By lunchtime, the group had identified key moments in the passenger experience where better training could make a difference. By mid-afternoon, they were brainstorming practical solutions. What if each new hire shadowed passengers with different needs, suggested a flight attendant with 30 years of experience, someone traveling with small children, elderly passengers, people with disabilities, walking in their shoes, so to speak. "And what if we created a simulation of high-stress situations," added Thomas, "so staff could practice keeping their cool when everything's going wrong?" Alexis found herself drawn into the creative process, her initial nervousness forgotten as she contributed ideas based on her own experiences as a young traveler. That evening, as she debriefed with her grandfather over video chat, Chuck's face beamed with pride. "You know what I'm most impressed by," he said. "You didn't just complain about what went wrong. You helped build something better." "I think Thomas deserves some credit too," Alexis admitted. "He could have just disappeared after the incident, but he's really trying to make changes." Over the next 2 months, what had started as a response to a single incident grew into something much bigger. The airline established a passenger advocacy group, with representatives from diverse backgrounds contributing perspectives on how to improve the travel experience for everyone. Thomas, instead of being fired, became an unexpected champion for change within the company. He spoke openly about his mistakes and what he was learning through the process of addressing them. "It's not comfortable," he told a group of new hires during a training session. "Looking at your own biases never is, but it's necessary." Alexis continued to consult on the project, fitting it around her school schedule. Her initial presentation evolved into a training video that would be shown to every employee of the airline. Chuck Norris, true to his word, invited Thomas to speak at several youth events organized by his foundation. Watching from the sidelines, as Thomas shared his story with teenagers, Chuck reflected on how unexpected the outcome had been. Not a lawsuit or a firing, but a genuine effort to create something positive from a negative experience. The airline's new training program launched 4 months after the incident. The Alexis Project, as it had come to be known internally, included modules on unconscious bias, de-escalation techniques, and cultural sensitivity. But perhaps most importantly, it emphasized seeing each passenger as an individual with a unique story. At the official launch event, the CEO invited Alexis to the podium. Now more confident in public speaking, Alexis looked out at the audience of airline staff, media representatives, and her beaming family. "When my ticket was torn up that day, I felt invisible," she said simply. "This program is about making sure no passenger ever feels that way again." As she stepped back from the microphone, the room erupted in applause. Her grandfather, sitting in the front row, gave her a thumbs up, the same signal he'd given her before her first karate tournament when she was 7. It had meant, "I believe in you then," and it meant the same thing now. Later, as they shared dinner at Alexis's favorite restaurant, her mother raised a glass in toast. "To turning tears into training programs," she said with a smile. Chuck added his own toast. "And to my granddaughter who taught us all that real strength isn't about fighting back, it's about building forward." What had begun as a moment of discrimination had transformed into a movement for change that would impact thousands of travelers. And for Alexis, it had become something even more valuable, a lesson in the power of persistence, dialogue, and the courage to create something better from something broken. 1 year later, Alexis stood at the gate of Flight 326 to Boston, her freshman year of college about to begin. The same airport that had once been the site of humiliation now felt different, partly because of what had happened in the months following the incident. "Last call for priority boarding, including families with small children and passengers who may need extra time," announced the gate agent, a woman with a warm smile and a pin on her uniform that Alexis recognized. It was the symbol of the Alexis Project, a small wing with a handshake in the center representing the bridge between airline staff and passengers. "Is that her?" whispered another agent nearby, glancing at Alexis. "The one the program is named after?" The lead agent nodded, discreetly. "Yep, she's heading to college now, full scholarship." What they didn't know was that Alexis could hear them, and the pride in their voices made her smile. She hadn't expected to become something of a legend within the airline, but news of the training program had spread beyond what anyone anticipated. 6 months after the launch of the Alexis Project, passenger complaints across the airline had dropped by 32%. More importantly, staff satisfaction had improved significantly. Employees reported feeling better equipped to handle difficult situations and more connected to the purpose of their work. The success had caught the attention of other airlines. 3 major carriers had now adopted similar programs, and an industry conference on customer experience had invited both Alexis and her grandfather, to give the keynote address. "Boarding pass, please," said the gate agent when Alexis reached the front of the line. Alexis handed over her phone with the digital ticket displayed. The agent checked it carefully, then looked up with a smile of recognition. "Ms. Taylor, it's an honor to meet you. Your work has made such a difference for all of us." Alexis blushed, still not entirely comfortable with the recognition. "Thank you. But it wasn't just me. It was everyone who was willing to listen and change." As she made her way down the jetway, Alexis thought about how far things had come. Thomas, the gate agent who had torn her ticket, now led workshops across the country, sharing his journey from that moment of bias to his ongoing work on personal growth. "Your seat is right this way." A flight attendant guided her, gesturing toward first class. Alexis started to explain that she had a regular economy ticket, but the attendant winked. "Complimentary upgrade. The captain's daughter went through your program during her training. He wanted to say thank you." Settling into the comfortable seat, Alexis pulled out her phone to text her grandfather that she was about to take off. Chuck had wanted to drive her to college, but she had insisted on making this journey herself. "I need to know I can do it," she had told him. "All checked in and about to fly," she texted. "Everything's good here." 3 dots appeared immediately. Then, "Proud of you, kiddo. Your mom and I will be waiting in Boston. Got a surprise for you." Alexis smiled, wondering what her grandfather had planned. With Chuck Norris, surprises could be anything from backstage passes to a martial arts exhibition to a quiet dinner with inspiring people he'd met in his travels. As the plane took off, Alexis looked out the window at the shrinking landscape below. She remembered how differently this journey had started a year ago, with a torn ticket and tears of frustration. Now, that moment had transformed into something none of them could have predicted. 5 hours later, as passengers filed into Boston Logan International Airport, Alexis spotted her mom and grandfather waiting near baggage claim. But they weren't alone. Standing with them was Thomas, along with the airline's CEO and several people Alexis didn't recognize. "What's all this?" she asked as she approached, accepting her mom's embrace. The CEO stepped forward. "Alexis, we wanted to be here for this moment. Today marks 1 year since the incident that could have just been another viral video of a terrible customer experience. Instead, it became the foundation for the most significant customer service transformation in our company's history." She gestured to the strangers standing nearby. "These are representatives from the other airlines that have adopted the program. They wanted to meet the young woman behind the change." Thomas stepped forward, looking more relaxed and confident than when Alexis had last seen him. "We have something to show you," he said, pulling out a tablet. On the screen was a video montage of staff from across multiple airlines sharing how the training had affected them. "Before this program, I dreaded difficult passenger interactions," said one flight attendant. "Now I have the tools to turn them into positive experiences. I didn't realize how my own background was affecting how I treated certain passengers," admitted another employee. "This training helped me see my blind spots." A pilot added, "In 20 years of flying, I've never seen a program connect so effectively with staff at all levels." Alexis felt tears welling in her eyes. Her grandfather squeezed her shoulder gently. "There's more," said the CEO, nodding to Thomas. Thomas cleared his throat. "The Alexis Taylor Scholarship Fund is now official. Each year, 10 employees from participating airlines will receive full tuition to complete degrees in hospitality management, with a focus on inclusive customer experience." Alexis looked to her grandfather in surprise. He grinned. "Don't look at me," Chuck said. "This was all their idea. I just helped with some of the paperwork." The CEO handed Alexis an envelope. "And this is for you, an open ticket to fly anywhere in the world whenever you want, plus an invitation to join our corporate board as a special advisor during your school breaks if you're interested." Later that evening, as Alexis unpacked in her dorm room, her mom helped arrange books on the shelf while Chuck assembled a desk lamp. "Did you ever imagine it would turn out like this?" Alexis asked, hanging up a framed photo of the 3 of them. Her mother shook her head. "Not in a million years. I was ready to hire lawyers and demand justice. But your grandfather said something I'll never forget." "What was that?" Alexis asked, looking at Chuck. He paused his lamp assembly. I told her that there's the kind of justice that punishes, and there's the kind that heals. I thought you deserved the chance to choose which one you wanted to pursue. Alexis nodded thoughtfully. I'm glad we chose healing. As her parents prepared to leave, Alexis walked them to their car. The campus was quiet in the early evening, stars just beginning to appear above the historic buildings where she would spend the next 4 years. You know, Chuck said as he hugged her goodbye, in all my movies I played a tough guy who fixed problems by fighting. But what you did, turning conflict into collaboration, that takes a different kind of strength, a better kind. Alexis smiled up at her grandfather, the action hero who had taught her that true heroism rarely looks like what we see on screens. Don't forget what I always tell you, he added. I know, Alexis replied. The strongest person in the room isn't the loudest. It's the one who can turn an enemy into an ally. They finished together. As Chuck and her mom drove away, Alexis turned back toward her dorm, ready to begin the next chapter of her life. Behind her was a year that had started with a torn airline ticket and ended with transformed lives. Not just her own, but thousands of others. Sometimes, she reflected, the most powerful stories don't end with a roundhouse kick. They end with a handshake, a new understanding, and a world that's just a little bit better than it was before.